What up, dudes? It's Gaz, and welcome back to another Warframe video. So, we got the top 10 most wanted Prime Incarnons today. Incarnons have been a really good system that a lot of players have enjoyed, and there's still plenty of Prime weapons that are really underwhelming in 2024 that could definitely use this type of upgrade. So I'm going to be showing my top 10 most requested for Primes specifically. These are all going to be Prime weapons that I think could use a little bit of help in 2024. So let's get right into it. But before we do, make sure you sub this channel. We do daily Warframe video uploads, everything from build videos, news videos, discussion videos, and the like. You're in the right place for Warframe content, so with that like button and that sub button. Alright, let's get right into it. But we're going to first start with a preface. Since these are going to be Incarnon weapons on this list, that means that nothing involving a alt fire can work. So, for example, the Euphona Prime. This thing would be great to have an Incarnon, but unfortunately for the Euphona Prime, if you press the alt fire button, you get a shotgun mode. So any weapon that has a shotgun mode or like an alt fire mode or a secondary feature of the alt fire button, that should not be eligible for an Incarnon upgrade due to the alt fire button being what transforms the weapon into an Incarnon. So that means Euphona Prime, out of the question. Tiburon Prime with its 3 different fire modes, out of the question. And that would probably mean that Sniper Incarnons are not on the table either. So, as far as, like a grab bag, this is the honorable mentions one. They're honorable because they could never actually be this, but you got the Corinth Prime, you got, the Vectis Prime, the Nagantaka Prime, although that thing is pretty good. Any Prime weapon that has an alt fire mode already is going to be on this, oh, that's too bad list. Like Fulman Prime, Panthera Prime, the list goes on. So, let's start off with my number 9. And of course, these weapons that are on this list are going to be, not really the best. That's why we're going to want an Incarnon for them. So I'm going to have a build for every single weapon as well. We'll show how it works in the sim. But let's start with number 9, because number 10 was all those honorable mentions. Number 9 is going to be the Cerberus Prime. Now, this thing is pretty old, and it actually has pretty decent stats. But in 2024, just a single target burst rifle is not really cutting it. Then, of course, you could throw on Prime Shred for some punch through to make it hit more enemies, but for the purpose of this build, we got Viral Heat Hunter Munitions. Now, this is a burst fire weapon, a primary weapon for that matter, and as far as what the Incarnon form on this thing could be, if they ever do add it, they could pick whatever they want. Maybe a beam gun, maybe I don't know, like whatever would be cool, honestly, because the way this stands right now, it's a burst fire single target weapon. And just for the purposes of all these builds today, we are running Arcane Rage and Arcane Precision just to make it, because these weapons are not really as meta, giving them a good chunk of extra damage here. So with this build, we can kill these Greniers, cast some Nourish on here. And of course, this is mainly Hunter Munitions doing the work here. So I would say if they make an alt fire mode for this thing, make it where it can hit multiple enemies at the same time. That's the big thing here. And also, it would be a big stat bump, giving us a lot more consistent crits. Maybe some orange or red crits with this thing could be pretty nice. But yeah, that is all Hunter Munitions right there. Those slash procs, you'll see the actual upfront damage that we're dealing are low numbers, but then the slash procs are doing a lot of the work here. So, Cerberus Prime for number 9. It's just kind of, it's disgustingly average. But it is actually a pretty nice feeling and nice looking weapon. Of course, there are variants on the Cerberus, like the Dex Cerberus and all that. And just to clarify here, we've got Arcane Rage for increased damage on headshots, and Arcane Precision for secondary damage on headshots. So yeah, primary damage and secondary damage buffing these weapons. So yeah, Cerberus Prime, not the worst gun in the game, but also definitely nowhere near the best, and probably not a weapon that people are really using super often nowadays. All right, so be your number 9. All right, moving on to number 8. This one's gonna be, just don't worry about the build too much, basically. Number 8 is the Zakti Prime. I think the Zakti Prime as an Incarnon would have the potential to be kind of fun. So the way this thing works, it's a delayed explosion needle launcher, and this thing can do a decent amount of procs. I have it like kind of like a hybrid DPS build right now, but trust me, this is not a build you want to really run. You can probably go like a full corrosive or a full viral build in the future, but this thing has delayed explosions, and it also sets enemies up for finishers too. So a kind of interesting and fun utility weapon, but the damage is definitely not really there.
So as far as, you know, how it works, we just fire it off at some enemies here, get some galvanized stacks. You have a delayed dart that explodes after a brief moment. And as you can see, the damage is not phenomenal. The stats on this thing are pretty bad, too. We will likely not be killing these enemies anytime soon. So I would say if they were to make an Incarnon for this, which I actually like this weapon quite a bit, just not really for damage, they'd probably make it where the Incarnon form is charged from body shots, just like the Torrid or the Angstrom. So I could see that being something pretty interesting. Maybe, you know, make it where it's a... I don't even know, if you have any ideas what they'd make a Zakti Incarnon like, let me know in the comments down below. But I'd say maybe, you know, some kind of... how about like a rapid fire, like a full auto needle launcher? That could be kind of interesting. And then you can see setting up some finishers. It is a okay weapon for sure, but not a good weapon. That's what we're kind of looking at today, is weapons that are not that good. Now, it has built-in gas damage, so you get lots and lots of different procs. But yeah, the weapon itself is pretty weak, and it is also semi-auto until the full auto changes in Jade Shadows. So I'd say, you know, this thing becoming full auto and having an Incarnon would make it really, really good. Yeah, the base stats pretty bad, even on the Prime. 8% crit chance, 1.8 multiplier, 42% status chance is great. But yeah, we got impact and puncture with gas procs, or gas damage for that matter. Interesting, but not exactly meta. That's gonna be your number 8. And why do I want this thing? Just because I like the Zakti normal, and the Zakti Prime is... I thought the Zakti Prime would be good for DPS, it's really not. Speaking of really bad for DPS, I know a lot of people that like this weapon will agree with me. The Baza Prime is number 7, with all of its 16 base damage glory. You know what's funny though with the Baza Prime? I might be laughing at its low base damage, but it actually has more base damage than the Soma Prime, which already got an Incarnon and was a very underwhelming Incarnon for a lot of players. But yeah, the Baza Prime, which we're talking about today, it's a silent SMG weapon, and just like that Cerberus, we're going to be using Hunter Munitions to really do a lot of the work here. I know it says Corrosive, and the Corrosive build can work on this thing, but I got Viral right now just because against these enemies, we really want Hunter Munitions to do a lot of the work. But yeah, it's got really, really low base damage. It's got okay crit stats and good status. You're basically going to be mainly relying on Hunter Munitions for a lot of these weapons because they are so, like, you know, old and outdated with their stats and like damage weightings. But yeah, the Baza Prime, it's the signature weapon of Ivara Prime, and it has really, really low base damage. Right there, the Butcher took quite a few bullets. Get some full stacks here. Now once we do that, as you'll see, the slash procs are doing all the work. The base damage is doing basically nothing, because there is no base damage. It's 16 base damage, but 100 munitions, lots of procs to stack up. Throw on Nourish for some more viral. And again, the 100 munitions is doing all the work. So this is a generic weapon right here, and I would not mind this thing to get some base damage upgrades. As far as the Incarnon form, how about you turn this thing into a bow or a crossbow in the Exalted form? Like, it's a silent stealth weapon is the intention of this. If you made it like a really crazy, like a Brahma shot or like a lens shot or something that would have really good damage, I think that could play into the stealth fantasy of this weapon pretty well. And yeah, it's got really nice sound effects. It's got nice recoil and all that. Like, you know, it's a good feeling weapon. It's just not in the damage department a good feeling weapon. But yeah, this thing can get the job done for normal levels, I suppose. That's be my number, I think that's number 6. That was number 7. Yeah, okay, so we'll move on to the number 7 now. Now this one's going to give some big nostalgia to some players, and it's actually not that bad in 2024, but I think it definitely deserves an Incarnon. It's going to be the Sicarus Prime. Unlike the Baza Prime, this thing actually has decent base damage, so an Incarnon for this would definitely push it over the edge into really, really strong territory. Got a corrosive heat build right here, and yeah, this is a burst fire secondary weapon, the Sicarus Prime, and I do think it's pretty okay. But yeah, some buffs would be nice as far as, you know, maybe some crits. Give me some red crits on this thing. If you remember you might remember back in the day, this thing actually was one of the best pistols in the game, and people were like, you know, trying to get ribbons for this used to be really expensive. Nowadays they're like not even 5 flat. So burst fire pistol here. A lot of that work is coming from those corrosive procs. There's no Hunter Munitions for secondaries, so we're making do with corrosive damage here. We throw on Nourish, well, viral and corrosive, and it can actually do some pretty decent work. So if they were to make an Incarnon for this, I'd be quite happy. Like, it would be really, really strong. We have the Sicarus Prime, just a little bit on the boring side in 2024. Not really the weakest weapon, but pretty boring for sure. Like, as far as generic weapons in Warframe, we have so many generic weapons, and I think any Prime weapon should honestly just be like, it should be top tier, personally. That's not the case right now, especially for some of the higher ones we're going over today. There are some pretty underwhelming Prime weapons, but yeah, the Sicarus Prime is not really one of them. It can do some good damage if you have the proper type of build. This is my number 6, the Sicarus Prime. I would love for this thing to become like a meta, like dual tox competitor, basically. And I think a lot of people would actually agree with that one because it is pretty forgotten in my opinion. Speaking of extremely forgotten, I doubt most people even remember this exists. The Jagara Prime is going to be my number 5. These are the signature weapons, or signature pistols of Mesa Prime, technically. And they've got, well, there's a lot going on here. So they're not semi-auto, they're not like burst, they're like kind of like in between, kind of like similar to the, I guess they are technically burst, but they're very similar to the Tigris Prime, which we might be talking about later. This is a underwhelming feeling pistol. I don't know how else to say it. It has good slash weighting, it's got good, hybrid stats, but the base damage is low, it's 38, the Sicarus was 50 if you remember correctly. So this has less base damage than the Sicarus. And yeah, just nobody really uses this because it's like, who even remembers this thing exists most of the time? They look so cool. Let's just go ahead and show how they work against these enemies. So, right there. I guess they are. I thought they were like the Tigris where it's like duplex trigger, but it's actually not. They're just actually burst mode. So, someone in these enemies. We currently got corrosive cold build because of my Riven, which gives cold. So I had to make do with what I had, and I did not want to do viral. So right there. There's some slash procs from the weapon itself, because there is no hunter munitions for pistols, so that's pretty nice. But yeah, I wouldn't mind this thing just... To be honest, the full auto changes in Jade Shadows will make these things a lot more enticing. But yeah, you throw in an Incarnon on these things, and it's going to be hitting really hard. Like, I basically want weapons that compete with the dual toxins for power level, and I do want them to be Prime as well, because the Burst in Prime is one of the best primaries in the game. And yeah, I want Prime weapons to be the best pistols in the game too, because right now, each kind of is just like the dual tox is like number 1 or number 2, and the Furus is like, pretty high up there as well. And there is no Furus Prime. So as far as Prime and Incarnons being the top meta stuff, you have to look down pretty low on the totem pole as far as what is the strongest Prime Incarnon in the game. And these could easily be them if they throw on some Incarnon perks on here. So yeah, full auto changes will make the Jagara Prime more enticing, but Incarnon would push it over the edge into like meta territory. Alright, so next one here. This is one that... Okay, I know I was supposed to pick weapons that were kind of bad, but for this one, it's just a weapon I actually like. I have nostalgia for this weapon. The Silva and Aegis Prime is my next choice for number 4 on the list as top 10 wanted Incarnons. This thing has base heat damage, that's already good. Has really low attack speed, but it has good, hybrid stats. If they were to make a Incarnon for this thing, I think it could become a top weapon in the entire game. We already have a Sword and Shield Incarnon with the Akin Brunt. But, yeah, I think this thing could deserve a nice upgrade here. Now, I haven't really been messing with it much recently, but I did try out Melee Duplicate last night because the crit chance is kind of low. On yellow crits, double stuff. Like, it hits a second time, basically. And since it has base heat, you can do some goofy stuff with, like corrosive and heat. And if you had viral, with nourishable viral corrosive heat, that's pretty good with no IPS. There is impact and puncture, I think it's like slash procs too, from the stance. So it's actually not a bad weapon, but I think that it could, it should be the most meta of meta, potentially. So we get some kills here. I guess you don't even need galvanized stacks for melees, but yeah. A lot of these procs are coming from the stance. Like you'll see impact and slash. That's from the stance we're using. But it's pretty good, just it's not really the meta of the meta. And that's what Incarnons are supposed to be. And I think that it could be enticing to have some new Incarnon melees in this game. Of course, there is a pretty strong Sword and Shield at the end of it. Of course, heavy attacks are going to hit really hard on this thing, too. Just punch them with the shield, basically. So, Silva Aegis Prime, my personal choice for a top 10 Incarnon request. But there's plenty, honestly, there's plenty of Incarnon melees that could deserve this. I try to keep this list mostly with secondaries and primaries, to be honest, though. Silva Aegis Prime would be one of my most requested because I like the Silva Aegis Prime, and I like the Silva Aegis normal when I was a complete noob and bought it for plat. Alright, let's move on to another melee. I know I said I keep the melees low. We have 2 melees in a row. This is probably the last melee for a while on this list. That's going to be the Sindo Prime. Yep, we don't have a heavy blade Incarnon yet, but the Sindo Prime is very old. This thing actually used to be a meta weapon for specific, niche applications back in the day. Nowadays, I think it has lower stats than the Galatine and the Gram Prime. So you got less base damage than the Galatine, and a lot lower attack, or a little bit lower attack speed, and also a lot lower stats in the Graham Prime. Yeah, a lot lower crit stats, crit multiplier, and status chance, but better attack speed technically. And also, the Sindo Prime is a gigantic axe, okay? What more do you need to have as a recommendation here? It's not really the best, and that's partially because heavy blade stances were nerfed at some point years ago. And nowadays, like, you know, like you got the really long stagger in this stance, the cleaving whirlwind. I know Temple Royale is better, but I like this one. And yeah, you know, if they were to make this thing an Incarnon, I could see that being kind of fun. Maybe make a special attack where, like, you keep spinning until you want to stop spinning or something like that. Or like the heavy attack creates a slash vortex or something. You know, they could be creative with it. Obviously, I'm not really trying to decide what the new Incarnon would be, but yeah, I think this could be a really nice one because it is very old. It is pretty nostalgic for some players. And, you know, I would just like a gigantic axe Incarnon. I think that's all I really need to say. A gigantic axe Incarnon, the Sindo Prime. It's not really an axe, it's actually a heavy blade, but it looks like an axe. So that's good enough for me. But yeah, that would be my request for one of the new Incarnons. And of course, we just spawn Nourish here. They got the Viral and the Slash, so they can kill these enemies with relative ease if you know, are doing the normal melee stuff. But yeah, there's no force slash procs on heavy. There's no, you know, like crazy slam AoE. There's really not a ton going on with the Sindo Prime besides the fact it looks cool. And that is not really good enough unless you're in like Captura, I guess. Alright, so speaking of Captura stuff and weapons that are, you know, used to be pretty good, this one I think is a sore thumb as far as primes go. It's going to be the Axe Stiletto Prime. The Axamati Prime could use some help too, but I think the Axe Stiletto Prime is definitely a lot worse. Now these things have a special place in my heart because this is actually one of the weapons I used in one of my first endurance runs ever in Warframe. It was like a Void Survival mission with Ivara a long time ago. But yeah, nowadays, they have really not the best stats. So just showing what the base stats on these things are. They are impact-focused status weapons with really bad crit, but they look cool. So as far as what the situation is here, we got a corrosive and heat build for, you know, removing enemy armor and relying a lot on galvanized stacks, to be honest. But yeah, this Axe Stiletto Prime are not very good. These actually get dodged on Riven buffs a lot of the time, I've noticed too. Like, these Riven stats should be a lot higher than they actually are, because the Axe Stiletto Prime gets passed over on Riven buffs for some reason, like, quite often. So I would love for this to get a buff. I mean, there are weapons that, like, need primes in the first place, like the Axani Prime, like Mirage's signature weapon. For some reason, they skipped over that one when they made Mirage Prime, and that, I'd never forget that, but Axe Stiletto Prime, these used to be actually really, really good, and in 2024, we have just moved past the power level these things provide, unfortunately. So this would be my number 2 most requested. And, you know, compared to, like, honestly, the Axe Jagara was doing a lot better than this. The Baza was doing better than this. And, yeah, I mean, maybe it's because I had an Axe Jagara Riven, but I didn't have a Riven on the Baza, so you throw on Nourish, we can shred them pretty quickly. But yeah, the Sicarus is definitely better than this too, so there are a lot of weapons that are just better than this, and I think it could use a Incarnon for sure. Like we showed in the Arsenal screen, there are a lot of Akimbo pistols that are just not really good. Like, you know, you could throw in the Ak Bolto on this list too, and it would definitely be appropriate. But I think this one is more nostalgic for a lot of people, so I think this one deserves one more. And of course, yeah, you can kill these enemies with it, but I'm using Arcane Precision for 300% extra damage, so that's going to be my number 2, and now for my number 1, I think this is a pretty obvious one to a lot of people who have played this game for a while, but I think number 1, and by the way, this will not be a very good kill time on these guys, it's the Tigris Prime Incarnon. Please, please, oh please, the Tigris Incarnon, please. Now, as far as the build, you could do like an upfront damage build, but I'm going to probably just go with a slash build here to show you how that works. Now, the Tigris Prime used to be a meta weapon in Warframe. Can you believe that? Yes, back when we didn't really care as much about like AoE killing stuff, this thing, and also status chance on shotguns worked a lot different back then. This thing was actually extremely good for killing high level, like, you know, heavy gunners and stuff. So you got a slash focus build here. We've actually got the special Nightwave Augment mod combat reload. If 5 pellets are headshots, increased reload speed by 120% for 3 seconds. Now, if you don't have this, and even if you do have this, you might just want to run Tactical Pump for 100% reload all the time. But since I have this, I decided to show it off anyway. So let's just go ahead and show the Tigris Prime in 2024 with a slash build. And of course, yeah, like I showed earlier, you could do a corrosive upfront damage build, but you could also just not use this thing. That's also a really good option. So it is a duplex trigger. So if you hold down the button, you'll fire out one shot. If you release the button, you fire the second shot. If you just click the button as normal, it fires both shots. So I've got a build for 4-round magazine right now. And yeah, so it has like basically no crit. Like right there, that was like what, like 1 or 2 crits with all those pellets. So yeah, if you hit all headshots on a paused enemy, I'm sure it looks pretty decent. But even then, like let's throw in Nourish for some viral with our slash. And yeah, since this thing has like no crit basically, you can't really run 100 editions. The Sancti Tigress has better crit, so I'd say use 100 editions on that one instead of this. But yeah, it's not like back in the day, we actually would be getting like, you know, more slash procs than that. And back in the day, we weren't as power crept as we currently are. So the Tigress Incarnon the Tigress Prime being, you know, single target was not as big of an issue. Like, if we talk way back, when raids were still in this game, we would be like, hey, don't kill the enemies, because the enemies will level up, and we can't kill them if they get too tanky. Nowadays, it's like, level 10,000 is nothing to us, as if you have the right builds and playstyles. So, I think to meet the power crept version of Warframe in 2024, a Tigress Incarnon would need some serious upgrades. We're talking crit upgrades. We're talking an Incarnon alt form that would be AoE. I think with those things alone, and maybe like a status chance upgrade or something too. I think with those things alone, you know, that 10% crit chance wouldn't be as bad if we had like a big crit chance increase. You know, the status chance per pellet or per projectile it's okay, but yeah, the thing is mostly slash weight, so I think it needs some buffs to make it usable, because it's very inconvenient to use right now. Like, you're reloading after every shot, unless you're using a build like me, where you have Prime Magazine Warp or Prime Ammo Stock for 4 in the magazine. It is really inconvenient to run this thing in 2024, and I wouldn't really recommend it at all, but if they give me Incarnon, like I'm really hoping they do someday, maybe this thing could, you know, climb out of the ashes and become a meta weapon again. So that's basically it for my video, guys. That's my top 10 I want. And of course, there are weapons that could be great. Like, you know, we went over the Ak Samadhi Prime, for example, the Ak Bolto Prime. You just search the word Prime. A lot of these things could use a little bit of help. And, you know, like, not to mention things like the Lex. Like, there's a Lex Prime Incarnon, but there's no Ak Lex Incarnon. Same with like the Vasto. There's no Ak Vasto. There's only a Vasto singular Incarnon. And I don't think that stuff's ever going to change. Like, I don't think we're going to get a Magnus Incarnon or anything like that, and get an Ak Magnus Incarnon for that matter. So, I'll see you guys in the next video. Again, there's really lots of weapons that could have been on here. We're going to talk about the Velox Prime tomorrow. The Velox Prime's so bad, I don't even want an Incarnon for the Velox Prime. Just give it something else, because the Velox Prime is bad. So, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Appreciate all the support, and take it easy. Peace!